Hi, I'm Natasha, and I'm going to tell you about the projects I'm doing for my master's degree. Because my background is more in illustration rather than animation, I want to focus on the art direction and storyboard strands as I want to build up these aspects for my portfolio. For this year, I plan to create 2 to 3 art direction and storyboard projects, as well as a short animated film about 2 minutes in length. My short animated film is Cosmonaut, which is the working title. It's based on the true story of the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, returning to Earth and meeting a young girl and her granny in an awkward encounter. I'm very excited about this project as I love all things space. Here's my space area in my room for proof, and it's kind of a continuation of a project I did in my BA, which was a book about the Soviet space dogs where I mentioned Gagarin a little bit. It's also the 60th anniversary of Gagarin's flight on the 12th of April this year, which seems appropriate. And I also think the Russian side of the space race isn't as well known as the American and NASA side. I plan to achieve this short film with limited animation and a focus on visuals, and the whole thing is heavily inspired by one of my favourite animated films, Forms in Nature by Kevin Darn, Studio Chromosphere. I think because of my background in illustration, this kind of more visual approach is great for my portfolio and my skill level. So here's my rough animatic for my Cosmonaut short. As there isn't any sound design as of the moment, I've used Gagarin by Public Service Broadcasting, as I've been listening to them a lot, especially their Race for Space album, as inspiration for the short. I'll talk about them a bit more later, as I've ended up making a few changes to my thoughts on audio and visuals, but yeah, here's my animation, and obviously I had to use Gagarin. It's too perfect not to use.
This is Moscow. This is Moscow calling. On the 12th of April, the Soviet Union orbited a spaceship around the Earth with a man on board. The astronaut is a Soviet citizen, Major Gagarin Yuri Alexeyevich.
The world's first cosmonaut. The first to open the door into the unknown. The first to step over the threshold of our homeland. The whole planet knew him and loved him.
Gagarin.
Was it hazardous? Yes, it was. The first strides into the unknown were about to be made. The hero who blazed the trail to the stars.
So yeah, that was my animatic. It's my first time making one, and I'm quite proud of it, although it definitely needs some work. The main themes I wanted to get across in this short is based around the awkward and strange encounter between these normal people and this extraordinary man who's come from space. These people living in rural Russia would have never seen something like this before, as an alien from another planet would have caused a similar reaction. It's the collision of the pursuit of progress and the everyday that makes the story interesting. I also wanted to have a focus on the sky, to help make the characters feel small in the big world, both in space and on Earth. And also, the whole story feels like a fairy tale or a legend, and it's even crazier because it's a true story. Because this whole project is based on a true story, I really wanted to make sure I did as much research as I possibly could, which for me was the form of mood boards. I did a bunch of mood boards, but I'm going to show you some of the character and location ones I did. Here's my Yuri Gagarin one, as I wanted to get some good references of him and his spacesuit. Here's one of the women and the farmers, as I wanted to get some ideas of what Soviet women looked and dressed like during this time. And here's one of some of the locations I will be including in my short. The one on the left is from Space Conquerors Park, which is now a little amusement park where Yuri Gagarin landed, and the other is of shots of Earth from space, as I'm using some of those in the beginning of my short. In terms of visual design for this short, I have a few ideas, and I'm going to go through 2 of them with you right now. So my first idea was inspired by this book called Through a Life by Tom Hugomat. He's French, I'm sorry. And it tells the story of an American astronaut, and it only uses 5 colours throughout the entire book, so it has this really striking visual style. I did end up doing some concept art in a similar style, using his colours specifically. I did this one where I've got some character designs as well as some kind of key moments, and then I also did this colour script, which was inspired by my first storyboard. The other style I was thinking of going for this short is more realistic in nature. I was looking at a lot of Russian landscapes and this amazing Russian landscape painter called Ivan Skishkin, who is well known for his depictions of Russian farmland and his beautiful renderings of clouds. I was also looking at an artist called Henry Wong. He does these really beautiful landscape shots and his use of colour and lighting is really beautiful, and I definitely want to incorporate some of this into my own work. Also, I've been collecting a bunch of pictures of clouds for this short as, again, I want to focus on that kind of big sky aspect. So I have this big mood board full of lovely clouds, which I'm definitely going to use for my short. I'm going to move on to some concept artwork now with character designs and some ideas of what I want the short to look like. Here are some character designs I did for the short. There's only really 3 characters in my short film. It's the spaceman, the girl, and her granny. For the characters, I really wanted to make sure the girl and her granny had very washed out, muted colours in comparison to the bright orange spacesuit. And also, these kind of character designs kind of ended up looking like a combination of Studio Ghibli and Tintin, which was unintentional, but I think it works well. I've also done some concept artwork. I'm going to talk about each of these one at a time. The first one is of the Vostok spacecraft entering Earth's orbit. I think this image is quite striking, and I really like how Earth turned out and the colours. The second is definitely inspired by those big sky things I was talking about. It's of the shot of Yuri in his parachute billowing in the wind with the women watching him. And then this is a second one I did without the characters of the sky. The last one is this one, which is of the end of the short where the girl returns 60 years later to the site of his landing, where she sees his statue and reminisces on that awkward moment she had with him. Another aspect I've been surprisingly enjoying throughout this whole process is storyboarding. Storyboarding is something I thought was a necessary evil throughout this, but I've actually really been enjoying this a lot. It's one of the things throughout this whole process that is really come quite easily to me, and I've actually been doing more storyboarding than concept artwork, and I plan to do a bit more storyboarding projects in the future. This is the first storyboard I made. It's mostly inspired by the animatic, but the ending is slightly different. I did this rough storyboard to try to get a hang of the ending, which is where the idea of the girl returning to the site 60 years later came from, and I think it's more effective in general. In terms of audio and sound, besides the ending, it's one of the things about this project that is really up in the air for me. I found this amazing interview with the girl 60 years later, which really inspired a lot of this project, and I've been in contact with the BBC to try and get copyright permission to use this sound. It's a bit of a long process, but hopefully I'll get there.
Бабушка делала луночки, а я просто помогала, бросала картошечку в лунки. Через некоторое время я обернулась в поле и увидела что-то оранжевое, красивое, непонятно что. И шел к нам навстречу. Бабушка испугалась, схватила меня за руку, и мы хотели убежать в сторону дома. Говорит: «Мамаша, стойте, я свой». Я бабушке сказала: «Остановись, послушай», говорит по-русски, человек, наверное.
Another idea I've had for sound is based on what I used for the scratch sound. Public service broadcasting song Gagarin works quite well, and it cuts off precisely at the same moment where my animatic ends, so I think it could work quite well. It would obviously need some workshopping and timings and stuff, but I think it's definitely a good option, and like with the BBC, I am in contact with the band, so I'm going to try and get permission to use that as well. So, what are my next steps for this project? Well, I have a few. The main one for me would definitely be sorting out the ending and the sound situation, as I'm still not 100% sure on either of those things, but they'll hopefully be sorted out soon. And smaller things include visual style and kind of refining characters. In terms of my other ideas I have for this year, they're not as well developed as the Cosmonaut, but I'll explain a couple of them here, my 2 main ones that I've been focusing on. The first is of these 2 woodland creatures, a fox and a badger, trying to decipher whether a mushroom is poisonous or not. It's quite different from the Cosmonaut project, and I think it could be a good way to kind of have a kind of more child-centered project with no sound and just music. The other idea I had is of a ghost lost in a museum trying to find her possessions, but realises they've turned into museum artifacts, and she tries to get them back. I think this could be a good option for some fun storyboarding, as well as some cool visual artistry, and yeah, I think it could work quite well. I'm also available if anybody needs any help with storyboarding or art direction. I'm more than happy to work on any other projects, so if you want to do something like that, let me know. So yeah, thank you so much for listening and watching. If you have any critiques, please let me know. I'm more than happy to take them. And yeah, thank you guys so much.